On behalf of the director, I warmly welcome.
Yes, my map.
Okay, please, everyone should mute his or her. All right. On behalf of the director, Professor Ito, I warmly welcome everyone to today's event. In a special way, I welcome the Public Affairs Officer of the U.S. Consul in Vegas, Mr. Samuel De, the Directors, American Centers in Lagos, in Abuja, and all our American Spaces Directors in Nigeria. Our special and distinguished guests are highly appreciated for accepting to share their wealth of experience and expertise. In today's program, they will shortly be introduced by the moderator, Mr. Gerald Eze. So today is Jazz International Day, celebrated on April 30th every year to recognize the power of jazz music in promoting peace, dialogue, and cultural diversity. It highlights the genre's ability to unite people across borders, foster artistic creativity, and serve as a universal language that transcends social and cultural boundaries. You can be rest assured you will learn a great deal from this program. Please sit tight and enjoy the interactions. I will now hand over the mic to Madam Josephine Gespa to introduce Josephine, over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Mata. I would like to introduce to us this afternoon Mr. Samuel Itayo, the country director of American Spaces Nigeria, is representing our PAO, Julie Mackay, to welcome us to this program. Please, let's unmute and give him a round of applause.
Good afternoon, everyone. So happy to welcome you to this year's International Jazz Day. Before I give brief welcome remarks on behalf of the Public Affairs Officer, I would like to thank profusely all our speakers who have volunteered to be part of today's event. We are indeed very grateful. And to our dear Director of OCA Window on America, Professor Ike Demego, and the Deputy Director, Dr. Mata Ejenti, we truly appreciate you and your team for organizing this program on behalf of American Spaces in Nigeria. We also would like to appreciate all our directors from all spaces. We want to appreciate you so much for coming and joining on this program. International Jazz Appreciation Day. Well, in the United States, we call it Jazz Appreciation Month. The whole month of April is always dedicated to appreciating jazz. But today is declared as International Jazz Day by UNESCO in 2011. And the major purpose is to highlight jazz and its diplomatic role of uniting people in all corners of the globe. The day serves as a platform to raise awareness about the virtues of jazz as an educational tool and a catalyst for empathy, dialogue, and cooperation among people. Jazz has long been intertwined with the quest for human dignity, democracy, and civil rights, and it has provided strength to the struggle against discrimination and racism. By embracing International Jazz Day, governments, civil societies, and educational institutions like all of us who are here contribute to fostering appreciation for the music and its potential to build more inclusive societies. The day, as we know it, serves as a platform for everyone to express himself or herself. Jazz as a form of art possesses a unique ability to break down barriers and foster mutual understanding and tolerance. So today, as we come together to celebrate the day, I would like all of us to loosen up and let's enjoy and learn what jazz has brought to the world. Very briefly, I would like to say again that jazz is appreciated throughout the month of April in the United States. And this is because jazz is the most consequential, influential, and innovative music to emerge from the United States, in particular from New Orleans and Louisiana. So today I encourage you, as we discuss the theme, the Jazz Revolution, empowering diversity and freedom of expression, I call on you to please learn and enjoy. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful and fruitful program. Over to you, Josephine.
Thank you very much, sir, for that brief introduction to the Jazz Celebration Day. I'd like to hand over to Dr. Mata.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Josephine, for, for handing over to me. I will go straight away to introduce the moderator for today's event. I'm going to be coordinating the program, while the moderator, Mr. Gerard Ezen, is going to coordinate the interaction of the panel session. So I'll go straight away to introduce him. Gerard Ezen is a Nigerian music educator, researcher, and performing artist. For 10 years, he dutifully studied under various mainstream of the indigenous Igbo musical traditions and has mastered a plethora of Igbo musical instruments, threatening to go extinct, especially the Oja, that's flute, and the Ubaka. He founded the Ichoku Academy of Music, where young people are educated on Igbo folk music and musical instruments. He was the Nigerian music ambassador at the Asian African Youth Festival at Beijing in 2016. Ez has delivered an invited lecture at Dartmouth College, Hanover, teaching how the Oja functions as a speech surrogate instrument. In October 2023, he performed at the David Twiner Art Gallery, New York, to mark the end of Njideka Akunyele's exhibition, coming back to see through again. He has several featured in BBC Africa and BBC Igbo. Eza is currently a research fellow at Isama Mandananga's Green University. Please, the round of applause, let us have it. I close the round. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mata. Today is an important day for everybody in the world because jazz has long been a global practice, a global musical tradition. I'm excited to moderate this session. I'll quickly introduce the speakers. We have 4 resource persons we're going to share ideas on the different sub-themes that we've selected for this conversation, for this event. And a quick one, I'll start with Professor Umeziwa. And I'll just go through from Professor Umeziwa to the fourth person in that succession. Dr. Chukwuemenam Emmanuel Umeziwa is a Catholic priest of the Global Diocese. As professor of ethnomusicology and a philosopher, he has carved a niche in the area philosophy of African music. A fellow of the American Council of Learned Societies and African Humanities Project, he understands knowledge from his diverse educational backgrounds. He taught music of other world cultures in the Department of Music at Nnamdi Azikiwe University, Awka, for many years before his appointment as the pioneer Vice Chancellor of Peter University, One. We can put up a hand of applause for Dr. I will also add that Professor Lezinwa was my teacher, and I was seated in the class listening to him teach us music of other world cultures. It was a delight, and today I am very proud to moderate a session where he's going to share knowledge, deep knowledge. The next panelist that I was introducing is Dr. Gillian Richards Greaves. Dr. Gillian Richards Greaves is an associate professor of anthropology in the Department of Anthropology and Geography at Coastal Carolina University in Conway, South Carolina. She's also the minority representative for the American Anthropological Association, AAA. Dr. Richard Greaves earned dual PhDs in ethnomusicology and anthropology from Indiana University, Bloomington, and a BA/MA in music education with a mathematics minor from Hunter College, Conway. Her research interests encompass the musical, cultural, linguistic, and ritual expressions of the African diaspora, emphasizing the connections between Africa, the Caribbean, and the United States. Dr. Gillian Richards Greaves is the author of Rediasporization, African Guyanese Kwekwe, which draws on more than a decade of ethnographic research in Guyana and the United States of America. She also authored several children's books, including Eclectic Pair with Granny and Me, and The Talking Snake. In 2022, Dr. Richard Greaves was awarded a Fulbright IIE grant, which allowed her to teach for 9 months at Nnamdi Azikiwe University, Anambra State, Nigeria. We can clap for Dr. Gillian Richards. The next panelist I will introduce is Uzoma Uzatu. Uzoma Uzatu is an independent writer. He was the 1989 distinguished visitor at the Graduate School of Journalism, University of Western Ontario, Canada. He was nominated for the Cain Prize for African Writing in 2008 for his short story, Symmetry of Life, published in Wasafiri magazine in England. He wrote the narrative for Scottish photographer Owen Logan's picture book, Masquerade. Michael Jackson Alive in Nigeria, which was exhibited at Stills, Scotland Centre for Photography, Edinburgh in 2014. He's the chair of the jury of the 2024 James Corey Prize. He's the author of God of Poetry, The Missing Link, and A Play of Ghosts. Who's also lives in Nigeria with his wife, Chidinma, and their 4 children. A round of applause for this guy. And the 4th panelist, of course, the last but not the least in any way, is Dr. Chika Gabriel Obalike, who will be joining us very soon, very shortly. Chika Gabriel Obalike is a priest of the Catholic Diocese of Ekulobia, Anambra State, Nigeria, and a lecturer in the Department of Religion and Human Relations, Faculty of Arts, Nnamdi Azikiwe University, Awka, Anambra State, Nigeria. He holds a PhD in African Traditional Religion, MA in African Traditional Religion, MA in African Philosophy, and PGD in Public Administration. His core area is philosophy. His core area in philosophy is metaphysics, and in religion is mysticism and ritual symbolism. He has interest in comparative religion and ancient Igbo civilization. He has authored and co-authored several peer-reviewed journal articles and chapters in books. He also has contributed more than 50 articles to newspapers and magazines, and has written a couple of books, including Ichwaja in Igbo traditional religion, a comparative study with sacrifice in Judaism, Hinduism, and Christianity. He's an African Renaissance advocate and social analyst. A round of applause for Dr. Obalike. So today we are celebrating jazz, and part of celebration in Africa is to hold conversations. Indeed, music in Africa is conversation, and jazz is that kind of music that one needs to really ask questions about. Is it music from Africa that went to America? And is it music that is influencing Africa? What is jazz? I am just a curious moderator, and the panelists are going to take us through this journey. But before we start, I invite Dr. Bata to cue in some music for us to listen to for 10 minutes. We have a 10 minutes musical interlude, and we're going to listen to what jazz is, and come back to the panelists, starting with Professor Besimwa, who is an African scholar and who is a philosopher, to handle the themes of freedom, expression, and diversity. Thank you. I see dreams and breathe. I see them bloom are in you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful thing. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed day, the dark sacred night, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I
the babies cry. I watch them grow. They learn much more than I never knew. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
Music written by Miles Davis, he calls So What?
Lagos never gonna be the same, never without Fela. Lagos never gonna be the same, never without Fela. Lagos never gonna be the same, never without Fela. He no go jumping, he no go party, he no go dancing, he no go lovey, he no go jumping.
Thank you very much for the music. We're still going to have more of it.
Independence
At the end
is
of
no
the program.
freedom. Independence, yes, it's come and gone. Cause we know now that independence is no freedom. Freedom to be yourself and freedom from being someone else. Andrew checking out, millions living a ton.
Hi, Gerard.
Thank you.
Thank you
Yes,
for the music.
I hope you've enjoyed all this music we cued in for this session. So when we can now begin this conversation because we have an idea what jazz sounds like. But what is jazz is still the question. How do we explain this music? When did it start? Where is it going? What mix, what cultural mix is in this genre? And how does it continue to influence the world today? For the world to stand up to celebrate the jazz legends and this very important musical tradition. So we are going to invite Professor Omeziwa, whose music I played last. And in the music, I heard something. Independence is not freedom. Topics like this are not what men doctors like me would want to bother myself with. Philosophers know how to handle it better. And he is a philosopher. So he's going to take us on the introduction. What is freedom? What do we mean when we're expressing art? And what do we mean when we say diversity? All links to jazz. Welcome, Father Umezima.
Thank you, everybody. And I want to say it's an exciting event for me to be here and to be part of this World Jazz Day. There's so many questions already raised, and I think this just presentation during the course of the discussion, other things will come. So I want to say from the beginning that I want to discountenance every main idea of that we may have had in a sense of a bias or a prejudice about some of these very big words: freedom, expression, diversity, jazz, the preservation and a continuum mentioned in relation to African traditions. And I want to say right away that you cannot preserve African traditions. You cannot. African traditions will preserve you. You cannot preserve your culture. Culture is undefended. It's a culture that will defend you. How many years have you here on earth to defend your culture? Culture will outlive you. The tradition will outlive you. As long as the culture is alive, as long as the tradition is alive, you can defend it. You don't have the you don't have the means, you don't have what you need to defend your culture. All you need is to allow your culture to live through you. So that's what the resonance of the culture. The culture must resonate in you. And if it does not, if your culture or your tradition doesn't resonate within you, not only that your culture may eventually die, but you are already dead. And I want to say again, I won't join in a bandwagon of those who describe African cultures as though it's a cultural monolith. Africa is a continent, and what we have is not African culture, we have is African cultures. And unless we give Africa that respect as the second largest continent, and because of the multicultural diversity we have in Africa, we may be speaking of Africa through the prism of a very tiny kaleidoscope that doesn't reflect the continent. Having said that, I want to say a word on diversity. Diversity exists in nature as part of nature. And I want us to understand this very well. Emphasis on diversity is, however, positive. However positive you are, or you claim to be, is emphasis on the things that divide humanity. All we need is to see it and leave it out. It is one of the popular window dressing topics of more civilized confusion. Warren Buffett, and you must know him, said companies should not worry themselves or waste time about diversity. It is the attempt to artificially arrange for people from diverse areas and business to be present either a union, corporation, a country, club, or whatever you North Carolina, North Dakota, and Tennessee. These states have banned the funding of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And about 25 states are waiting to pass more bills, more than 70 bills against diversity, equity, and inclusion. You cannot fight nature. If you look at biodiversity, it is natural. Diversity is in nature. It's a natural thing. But trying to make it artificial is a war we can never win. The inherent tenacity of jazz to survive the onslaught from critics speaks to its strength. Before I say a word on jazz, I want you to know this. Jazz committed two sins. One, it originated among Black people. Two, it did not originate among the educated class. So it was trying to make its way to the top from the backrooms, from the streets. And it was difficult for those who had the say to welcome jazz into the club of musical genre. So, having said that, I want you to understand that jazz as a word originated from I know not who, can be traced back to the right time of the 1890s. It moved from New Orleans up to New York, to Chicago, and of course, to Kansas City. And it was hugely despised and rejected by whites. Some blacks called it the devil's music. Why? Because Black people counted jazz as one of the innovations that, in this case, was attracting more hatred for them as Black people. So they didn't know why some of their folks should invent jazz. To add to what they were already going through the hands of the oppressors. Well, those who rejected it perhaps did that because it was not their invention. Jazz is Black because the roots go back to West Africa. At the introduction, Mr. Gerard was asking whether jazz is an African music in the US, in the Americas, or whether it's the truth is that jazz does not mean one thing, it is liquid, very fluid. So unlike every fluid thing, it takes the shape of the container. And that's why jazz at the origins, at the beginning, the jazz of Duke Ellington, the jazz of Ella Fitzgerald, the jazz of Saxon. These things will always contrast with the jazz that you have come to know today, like the jazz of Yannick, like Hugh Masekela from South Africa, and a number of them, even Fela, can't miss Fela, who was deep into jazz too. So jazz, like democracy, takes the shape of those who practice it. That's why it gives you a latitude of expression. That's why it allows you to express yourself any way you want. That's why it allows you to improvise. So that we know that Black people generally are linked to whatever type of rhythm or melody or polyrhythm that exists. That's why we say rhythm is Black, harmony is white. So it's good to understand that the creation of the rhythm, which goes in cycles, the cyclic movement of rhythms allows for the ability of a musician, whatever the instrument is, to navigate, to travel, and to even lock part of his brain while playing on his favorite instrument. It is because time, as conceived by African and some other non-Western cultures, time is not linear. Time is cyclic. So you sometimes you measure your music in bars. African music is in cycles. It goes in cycles. So once you have you are just repeating one cycle of rhythm. And because you are repeating one cycle of rhythm, it allows the musician to know what to do to his instrument, how to travel, whether to modulate and come back and travel and not come back. It's up to the musician to learn the instrument. It's because of the rhythmic importance that this resource gives to jazz. I want to say immediately that even for the Black Americans, because this is one of the musical genres that launched America on the universal map of music. It's not the Euro-American classical music, no. It is Black American music that found the spot for America, the universal musical map. So, but it's written in her book, Black Music in Our Hands, said, the music called jazz had no words, but it had power, intensity, and movement under various degrees of pressure. I could feel that the music knew how it felt to be black and angry, black and down, black and love, black and fighting. So for every human endeavor, it means that jazz has the capacity to express all the emotions that humans can boast of. So, and to talk about jazz revolution, revolution as a word to be understood from the various angles, from various nuances of revolution in religion, of revolution in the sciences. I remember Thomas Kuhn writing the structure of scientific revolutions in 1962 that gave us the phrase that people now bandy about, paradigm shift. So, and there have been so many revolutions from the, even Copernican revolution is a revolution because it changed the way we perceive this universe from the polemic idea of the cosmos to the time of Copernicus. Just like the physics of Isaac Newton changed the course of physical realities and our understanding of gravity. And up to the time of Einstein, up to the time of Max Planck, and up to the time of Heisenberg, was the uncertainty principle and all the theories that we know of surrounding the issue of matter, the issue of weight as particle or whatever. So revolution means a lot, but it means forceful takeover of a scenario, of a state of affairs. That's exactly what jazz did when it came on board around the turn of the century, the 20th century. But it started way beyond that because it took from ragtime, took from bebop. So by the time the name came jazz, even nobody knows the meaning of jazz. Even in Africa today, in Nigeria today, the word jazz means a lot of things, a lot of good. Even meaning talisman, right? Even meaning, yes, when we say jazz, someone is using jazz. It means it's using unconventional means, right? So when it came up, nobody knew the meaning of jazz. But today, you see, like something that is very natural, it found its way and still on top and has remained on top ever since its appearance around 102 years ago. So for this musical genre that we celebrate, thanks to the resilience in the people who invented that and the latitude of freedom of expression that jazz explores, that may perhaps be the secret behind it still being on top of the charts today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Omeziwa. Quickly go to the next panelist, Dr. Gillian Richards Reeves. And she'll be looking at freedom, expression, and diversity in jazz music from the roots till the 1980s. It's stated that the addition of blues to ragtime is what created jazz. But we need to understand, the tradition, how it starts, how did it move into the next level. Dr. Gillian Richards Graves will handle this aspect of the conversation. You're welcome, Dr. Richards Graves.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning if you're here in the USA. Thank you for having me. So we have 10 minutes to cover several decades, so I will move quite quickly. Can you hear me? Can you hear me well?
Loud and clear.
All right. So let's go. So as I said before, I'll try to go quickly so that we cover the basics. All right. So I begin with some of the famous faces of jazz music. But when we speak of jazz, we have to keep in mind that, of course, it does not represent a single sound, a single style of music, but as we'll see, there are different subgenres of jazz. In the 1920s, we have swing, 1930s bebop, 1940s cool jazz and hard bop. The 1950s, we have free jazz or the avant-garde jazz, this new thing. By the 1960s, we see jazz fusion, you know, whereby jazz started taking on or blending with other forms of American music. Then by the 1980s, we see sort of an anti-modernism or a pushback to all of the changes that were happening with this genre, to go back to the basics of, Louis Armstrong and those earlier jazz musicians. And later on, there are other changes happening, blending with other foreign or international musics. But I'm going to be stopping at 1980s. So, and usually when we think of jazz also, we tend to focus on the instrumental aspect of it, but we also have to keep in mind that there's a vocal aspect of jazz. And one of the key features of that vocal aspect is scatting, right? This vocal technique whereby the singer imitates instruments, singing with vocables, right? Sometimes we hear the term nonsense syllables, but we don't use that, right? Syllables without meanings, right? And so we'll see examples of that. So let's move along. My computer is acting a bit weird. So what we see here, so jazz is often referred to as America's classical music or African American classical music because it is uniquely American. There are several influences on what we know today as jazz music, and some of the social forces that impacted or shaped jazz music included urbanization or the movement of African Americans from rural areas, the farming areas in the South to the North, right, and the West. Racism that impacted what we know today, the advent of the recording industry. So being able to hear jazz on the radio and things like that, that shaped what we know today as jazz. And some of the features of this music, as you'll hear in a minute, includes improvisation. Think of creating it on the spot, making it up on the spot, right? Syncopation, right? This idea of sort of emphasizing the weak beats. I'll talk about that some more. So in Western classical music, we emphasize beats in a 4/4 measure. We emphasize beats 1 and 3. So you would hear the count given as 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1 and 3 are considered the strong beats in Western classical music, but what you'll hear in jazz is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. So those beats that are considered weak in Western classical music are what are emphasized in jazz, right? We'll also see rhythmic propulsiveness, that almost like a train chugging along, right? So jazz did not just emerge out of the blues. There are several other genres that preceded it that sort of shaped what it became. That include ragtime, right? So ragtime included sort of a like a walking bass in the left hand, pum 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 pum, that pulsating bass, and then a melody on the in the right hand, right? So a melody over that steady walking bass. Blues, marches, African American religious music, European classical music, American popular song and musical theater. And see, with ragtime, jumping back to the top a bit, they had what were called coon songs, right? So this is an image on the right here of Ernest Hogan's All Coons Look Alike album. And so coon songs basically were um, stage plays, songs in stage plays that sort of denigrated African Americans. They highlighted sort of negative stereotypes of African Americans, and it was often done by whites wearing blackface, but also sometimes blacks also profited. Ernest Hogan was an African American who sang those types of songs. So there were some key spaces in which jazz flourished, or we would say jazz emerged, and the principal one is New Orleans. Excuse me. At the time, New Orleans, you could think of New Orleans as being divided into three sections or three social spheres: Black, white, and Creole. And the term Creole there referred to people who were Black and French mixed, so mixed race people. And so I like this phrase, this quote from Ingrid Monson. She is a jazz musician, amazing scholar, and she stated, quote, "The emergence of jazz has often been explained as the meeting of uptown African American brass and string band tradition of blues drenched orally transmitted music with downtown Creole band tradition of instrumental virtuosity, musical literacy, and training in classical music." So you can see there the diversity that gave rise to jazz in New Orleans. But then we also have to think of how migration impacted that, and this is where Chicago comes in, right? So after surrounding the world wars, World War I and World War II, there were these mass migration of African Americans away from the South, looking for greener pastures, fleeing prejudice and things like that. And so you had a lot of these musicians. They were already traveling the country, these jazz musicians, but after World War I, many of them found their way in places like Chicago. And so that migration, now you find all of these musicians playing in clubs and stuff like that. So during that time, there was segregation. But this is where you see the power of music, because in many of these clubs, even though these spaces were segregated, in many instances, these Black musicians had an opportunity to sort of cross those boundary lines. You had these clubs that were called Black and Tans, right? These are the clubs where, even though the outside world is segregated, Black musicians, white musicians, they interacted in these spaces. And so here are some of the key composers, ensembles, and big bands that kind of shape what jazz is. Jelly Roll Morton, Duke Ellington, Fletcher Henderson, Don Redman. These are just a few. And so in Jelly Roll Morton's Black Bottom Stomp, you will see this one of the musical features you'll see is double time. This is where instead of playing the beat like this, you double up, and that kind of so it gives emphasis and it gives more like flair and power to the music. Shout choruses, the riffs are these melodic, rhythmic, repeated patterns that are played over and over again. Big band jazz and this concept of the jungle sound. That's one of the things. That concept of jungle sound also has sort of a pejorative aspect to it, because this idea of this is what Africa sounds like, or this is African, right? And so when we think of this jungle sound that was booming or blossoming in the 1920s, right? It it included or they used instruments or additions such as the pixie mute, the toilet plunger. You guys would have seen a lot of the trumpet players and the not trumpeters use it, and trombone players also use it. The gargling in the throat, because that is this idea of, this guttural sound, right? And so this is one of the things that you see also booming, some of the musical features booming in the in the 1920s. Another aspect or another factor that shaped the music was the broadcasting in the swing era. The 1920s was this era of swing. And so you had sustaining programs and sponsored programs, and these were aired on the radio. So sustaining programs were those programs that were where, the music from hotels and clubs were aired on the radios, right? And then you had sponsored programs where you had big companies like Coca-Cola and Lucky Strike, right? They would sponsor musicians, right? And so they would get to hear their music. And in both of these categories, white musicians had a better opportunity. Again, segregation was the order of the day. And of course, we see how racism played into that too. But so that also impacted who was seen playing this music. You understand? But a lot of Black musicians found they gained opportunities to play in hotels and clubs. So that also that helped to shape the music. But like I said before, some of these spaces like the Cotton Club, the Savoy Ballroom, they sort of broke with tradition, as it were, or they allowed Black musicians to have an opportunity to play. There were some women, some successful all-female bands. But of course, such as the House of Charm, Darlings of Rhythm, International Sweethearts of Rhythm. But of course, you may not have even heard of them, but they made a name for themselves, but they, of course, were not as popular or visible as the male bands. So now I'll quickly go over some of the main genres, the subgenres, the basic features of several subgenres of jazz. Beginning with the 1920s, we have swing. Now, this was a style of jazz that used the big band, lots of brass, horn riffs, rhythmic drive. The rhythmic drive was derived from this boogie woogie bass line. So there's right? And so you will hear that. So one of the principal performers of this time was Louis Armstrong, Satchmo. We all would have heard the song "It Don't Mean a Thing." I don't know if you have it queued. We can listen to about 30 seconds of it.
Dr. Richard Bruce, I played Louis Armstrong earlier in
Okay.
during the music salad, and I'm going to play some selected music again after the
Okay.
panelists. Just to
Okay.
go ahead, and we appreciate if you can summarize
Okay.
because of time. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll go very quickly. So you guys have heard that one. So then we move to the 1930s. You have a combo style jazz emerging. So coming out of the big band, you have of the swing era, you have these faster tempos, more complex melodies and harmonies. And if you get to listen to Dizzy Gillespie's A Night in Tunisia, you will hear that much different than the 1920s. And so then we move to the 1940s, 50s. We have cool jazz and hard bop. And here, this cool jazz idea is now associated with California and the West Coast. And this is where we have to consider the function of the music. What is the role of the music? If you're just sitting in a lounge and you're listening to music, you don't want jump up and raucous music. So that is where this idea of cool jazz came about. Think of a river flowing. So the notes were played in a way that's connected in legato style, as opposed to hard bop, right? And that's a jazz style that has phrasings from like blues. It was more bluesy, rhythm and bluesy, and associated with dancing. And, it was more upbeat. Then we move on to the civil rights movement. So we see that culture, American culture, impacted the jazz era. Even as the music is impacting culture, the culture is also shaping and impacting. So this in the civil rights era, we see music that's now addressing freedom and addressing um, liberation, equality, that kind of thing. But we also see music that's kind of more simplistic, right? The repetition of one or two chords, and now they're using sort of modes instead of scales where you would have a resolution to a tonic, or it just seems like it's open and it's just it's just a continuous mode. We also have free jazz of the 1950s, which many people rejected because it just, for many of them, they felt like this free jazz was just out of order, right? It abandoned this idea of fixed harmonic rhythmic patterns, and it's just basically it was free, right? Avant-garde music, avant-garde meaning a new thing. Ornette Coleman is one of those who pioneered that. And then we move to the 1960s and 70s, where we see there's now jazz fusion. It's now incorporating incorporating rhythmic patterns and melodies from funk music and rock music. And so Miles Davis, who was a pioneer of this era, was inspired by Jimi Hendrix, right? Who was for all intents and purposes a rock musician. And then lastly, this is my last slide because we had to go very fast. We go back to basics. We see in the 1980s, there's this push against all of the change that has happened in jazz. And we see Wynton Marsalis, who is from New Orleans, right? He led this movement. He pioneered this movement. And the goal was to highlight traditional jazz styles of the pre-1950s era. So Wynton Marsalis, who was in the 80s, the artistic director at the Lincoln Center, the Jazz at Lincoln Center program, he did this album called Portrait of Louis Armstrong, where he took it back to that original jazz or that earlier form of jazz. And this is where I'll stop. That was great.
Thank you very much, Dr. Richard Briefs. She's been able to give us real details on what jazz is, how it starts, what are the instruments, who are the major players from the events, the concert, the nature of the concerts to the musicians. We're really not exactly keeping to time, but I understand jazz so well, and I also understand African music, and I know that one quality of jazz is improvisation. You really can't take it away from that genre of music, and I don't think that you can discuss jazz without improvising. So we're going to quickly call the next speaker, and I plead that we try to keep to 8 minutes. Um, I really plead because it's not so easy for us to stop you when you start making these wonderful presentations. And with that, we invite Mr. Oza to discuss freedom, expression, and diversity in early jazz music during the Industrial Revolution of the New World. Welcome, Mr. Oza.
Everybody can understand the problem with all of these things. You know, jazz. The white man is yet to know how to define jazz, as we are seeing today. Nobody can define jazz. And you know why? They don't know the roots of jazz.
jazz came from Africa. Spirit music. What the spirit is saying, how can a human being define it? That's why when they're talking about all these things about New Orleans and all that, they don't understand it's the African youth that went to America to enter their stalls to give them this kind of music that is beyond normal interpretation. You can go to the Europe and be talking about harmony in music, like you are doing classical music, and you can put it in all these things. But the improvisation of jazz is beyond all that. So when we talk about jazz, we are talking going back even before slavery, when the African mind allowed all things to come in. And when they took these Africans to the New World, all the places past the ocean and all that, they were doing their spirituals, doing their kind of music, which is jazz. And then they started talking about the slaves in New Orleans. They are putting to effect their own African spirit coming out in the shape of this little we are calling jazz. Initially, we are calling it jazz. Spelling it with S. Just as they got to Z, which shows that look, they are going up. At a point, they will throw their baseball and say it's jazz ball. Because jazz is beyond human comprehension. If you are talking about jazz, you are talking about the entirety of the world. So when we are talking about this theme of the revolution of jazz, empowering diversity and freedom of expression, we're indeed talking about how we took this spirit of Africa into the world to empower diversity, empower freedom of expression. When we are talking about the musicians like Louis Armstrong, Satchmo, when you go deep into the music, you can understand the African essence, which sometimes people would not want to discuss. They would like to tend to think because they put in all these Western instruments and all that. They don't understand that the essence is actually spiritual, back home to Africa, to the roots. If we are talking about Duke Ellington, if you listen properly, you will get to the key of the music as coming from here. But people will try to interpret it by trying to use foreign influences that are neither here nor there. And that takes you to nowhere. The music, even like when you talk about gender, you will see the woman, what they did with jazz, like Ella Fitzgerald, Billie Holiday, Etta Walters. Jazz inspires the best in humankind. It is the kind of music when you want to study for your exams, try to play jazz, soft jazz. You score an A. I'm telling you the truth. When you listen to somebody like Charlie Parker, we can understand that this is a spirit, and spirits are in Africa. The white man does not believe in spirits. We tell his poltergeists, they are making noise. But in Africa here, go and beat our fathers. That's why I like somebody like Gerald, who will go and meet some of these old men who are expiring with their order. But one man in my hometown sold his order, and the village had to get back to contribute money to buy back the order. Because you must not sell the soul of the community. And the soul of the community is that order. When we talk about Owaga and all these other things, go and check the music. These are the real instruments that showcase music in its purity, as opposed to, look, you can say you are doing Moog saxophone and all the other things of Sonra in Africa, in America. Of course, incidentally, when Sonra came to Festa, they told him to pay homage to his spirits. He was even more interested in telling us that it was our father who sold him. So he's not paying any homage to us. Some of these people are confused. They don't understand what really happened in terms of the slave trade and all the things that followed. But the triumph of it all is that we are talking about jazz today in a place called American Space in Oka, which shows that jazz has triumphed. You have abolished slavery in 1865. But when we have the presence of jazz in our communities all over the world, whether you talk about the Jew, whether you talk about the black man, whether you talk about this, it's the triumph of even those guys who were sold as slaves. And it's the triumph of the African spirit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. When writers talk, it's always different. You know, they will shake up everywhere. And I think most of the issues he raised will be better responded to when we have the interactive session, because he has raised very, very strong points that I'm sure people want to ask more questions. We'll move quickly to Dr. Opalike, who, when I introduced him, he was just, yeah, he was just almost here. But now you have seen Dr. Opalike, and he's going to talk about the jazz activists and activism, freedom, expression, and diversity in jazz music. You hear a song like Strange Fruits, you wonder, what is this fruit? And then any person who is possessed by the creative spirit and who is really expressing the soul of the community like jazz musicians did, would really look at the strange fruits and begin to function as an activist. So Dr. Balike is going to take us through the world of jazz with focus on activism during the era that jazz evolved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gerard. Straight to business. The earlier speakers have given the foundations and origins of the jazz music or genre of music. As Gerard said, my duty will be to expose what artists did with jazz music during the civil rights movement. Uzatu mentioned Billie Holiday, because she was the first person that readapted the poem of the poem with the title by Gerard already mentioned. The other was written by Abel Merodon, Strange Fruit. She readapted it and used it to speak against the horrors of the Jim Crow era of lynching. In fact, Label refused to record her, and she revolted against them to be recorded by Commodore in 1939. And that was the first time the jazz artists ventured into human rights activism. Louis Armstrong did anything, and all of those greats, including Nina Simone, all joined hands during that period to do their bit with jazz music to help the efforts of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to, fight for the rights of the blacks. When Uzatu was speaking, I got fired up, and as much as he was trying to represent the religious dimension, talking about spirit, I think what we get wrong many times is the idea of culture. Culture is the spirit of a people in a particular era, connecting with the old spirit of the people and projecting to the possible spirit of the future. It's the spirit of the people in a particular era. In our musical culture of today in Nigeria, what is the spirit that is leading the people? When you listen to lyrics, when you listen to instruments, what is the spirit that is leading the people? That is the culture of the time. And that is where the human spirit is. And so when the blacks began to fight about their rights, they expressed it in jazz music. Of all the characters of jazz, two, the swing and improvisation already mentioned here, are the two characters that I think that are naturally African. When I read about jazz or music that has its roots in Africa, I always remember my local environment. There is this popular masquerade dance that we call Iwamo. When I was young, I was part of that ensemble. And we were using basically about 5 instruments: the ogene, the oja, the lokiewa, the neighbor. And that was very hot. And by the time I finished secondary school and was in the middle section, I came back and people have added obo, added udu, and added other instruments. It shows the openness of the African music whereby you can improvise. And when people are learning, you will find out that those who came to do the instrumental, they don't have any chart, they don't have any book, they don't have any musical notes. What they simply need to do is to listen to what the other man is doing, and then you know what to do. That is improvisation. And jazz music is the African music where people were in the streets expressing their frustration, expressing their pain, expressing their suffering, without even bothering whether there was anybody looking at them, without even bothering whether they were making money out of it. It teaches us something. If people did not get interested in what was happening in the streets and begin to record what was happening, study the trends in what was happening, we wouldn't be here today. And very many times, knowledge wastes away in our African streets because we that are in the academia are not paying attention. I am not thinking that our forefathers did not know that there was a possibility of representing human experiences in writing. But one of the flaws of writing is that it fossilizes knowledge and culture. And so we keep being within what is written in the book, studying and re-studying them. But the African dynamics understood that there wouldn't be any point fossilizing human experiences. Encounter human experiences every day and let it speak for itself. And this is what jazz stood for. In South Africa, Phil Masakela, Miriam Makeba, who partnered with him, also unleashed this African spirit, which is always restless. Because the African spirit is expressed in so many ways, including Rastafarianism, where the African is always looking for a place of peace, for that Zion, where the African is always moving away from the experience of Babylon, wanting that place of peace. And this is what the blacks were expressing in jazz. And this is what they brought in to civil rights movement. Nina Simone, who famed as the priestess of soul, did a lot in fostering the jazz music during this era. But what touched me most was when they killed Martin Luther Jr. King in 1968, she did a track that she called Wow, the King of Love is dead. And it caught on. And she also wrote what she called Young, Gifted, and Black. I want to end what I want to say, or what I've already said, with a quote from Martin Luther himself, in appreciating the contributions of jazz music in his human rights movement. He said, "It is no wonder that so much of the sexual identity among American Negroes was championed by jazz musicians. Long before the modern essayists and scholars wrote of racial identity as a problem for a multiracial world, musicians are returning to their roots to affirm that which was stirring within their souls." And having said that, I want also to pay tribute to our own Fela Anikulapo, who saw jazz and saw the African drum and brought it home to Africa and expressed the revolution that almost crippled the military exports of Nigeria. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Omalike. We are a little bit behind time, and we're going to move quickly to the interactive session. But I think that we take, instead of 10 minutes to listening language, we'll take just 3 to 4 minutes musical interlude. Note your questions and be ready to fire them. And of course, the presenters, the panelists will quickly respond to them since they are done with the major presentation.
Please, let's also feel free to type your question in the chat box so that we can save some time. We are waiting for the DJ.
Someplace, I sleep the place, I sing a song, I sing a lago, a lago. Them vex, complain, them say, oh God, them this. I go someplace, I sleep the place, I sing a song, I sing a lago, a lago. Them vex, complain, them say, oh God, them this.
Thank you very much. We move from Fela's Panza to Water No Get Enemy, still by Fela. And if you wait to hear the last voice in that music, then 20 minutes will be gone. And then we ended with a music by Atumwa Upo. And Atumwa Upo is a spirit manifest from Anambra State. Upo is in Anambra State. And when I mean spirit manifest, real spirits, African people believe in this spirit manifest as representatives of the spirits of the ancestors manifesting and speaking to them on different themes of life. And you listen to that voice texture. That literal texture is what you cannot strap with the Western notation. And the very first attempt, I think around 1867, to notate African American music, the people who try to do that acknowledge that it is difficult to capture some aspects of the rhythm and particularly the tonal texture and the manner with which Africans express music in songs. Now that we have keyed in some music to help you appreciate what the speakers mean when they say jazz is essentially African music. So it even started before the era of slavery, as Mr. Ozatu raised. Issues like this, I am sure people want to respond to, ask more questions, and learn. And the floor is open, and I think we start with every other American faces apart from Walker Winnie. Those here will take last to ask questions.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Gerard. So we have just a second, Dr. Mata. We have a question on the chat box from Window on America, Abeokuta. Someone is asking, I believe it's Mr. Uzo Mazim Zwatu. In his presentation, he was talking about spirit. So someone asked, do we then say those who want to get into the music world will be led or used by spirits?
I just want to again, Christian. Sorry, I can't help you because they are good spirits. And the music of our ancestors, they were all good spirits. Thank you.
Doctor, did you get that? Okay, so we go to Calabar. Calabar asks, we have heard about how jazz was important in the fight for freedom in the past. How do we use it as a tool to fight for a better Nigeria? Any of the panelists can take it.
Yes, I'll direct this question to Professor Umezimwa and particularly because of the way he started this presentation addressing the issue of revolution.
All right, thank you. How do we appropriate the qualities, the core elements, the components of jazz into nation building? Well, like you very well know, Nigeria is not yet a nation. And so we don't need to go into this because we have no core values as a people. Nigeria is still independent nations lumped together. So we are a geographical expression as a country, but it does not automatically mean we are a nation. Now, when you look at the elements of jazz, like this freedom of expression, freedom of every instrument to participate in the music, there is what we call in music the arrangement of different musical instruments. There's a word for it. Command. So we arrange musical instruments so that they converse. One instrument speaks at a time, another instrument speaks at another time, arranged in bars. So if if such arrangement exists in Nigeria, what you are demanding for will possible. In fact, jazz has all the qualities that we need to mimic as human beings. One, it began naturally from original intelligence, not artificial intelligence. It began naturally and was attacked from every side, the way people are attacked in life. But because it was original, not intended for gain, as I think Dr. Malik mentioned, not intended for gain or mere popularity, but it came naturally to fill a space, a vacuum that was there. No amount of attack or criticism could put it down. When Beethoven wrote the Fifth Symphony, everybody in the musical world criticized this piece as a way not to begin any symphony. But today, it is about the most popular symphony on earth. So what I'm saying is this: the way jazz survived all the critics, the way it allows for every instrument to participate in the making of that music. Everywhere jazz exists. And those components that make it unique, these are the things that we can appropriate. And the way jazz thrived in the United States, that's the same thing we need to understand about diversity. God created diversity, and there's no point fighting it. But the world prefers homogeneity, not knowing that homogeneity and heterogeneity should be working at all times in complementary fashion. Thank you.
Thank you. I would appreciate if Dr. Malik can quickly respond to this issue too. And I'll just add to it, can we, when you demand for freedom, does it make the freedom difficult? Because I like what Professor Lezima described. There are structures to the flow of nature. Its freedom is not missing. And it appears that once we start saying we are fighting for it, then it becomes illusory, it becomes something we never get to have. What do you have to say about this in respect to jazz music?
Thank you. I think Professor sets the stage for a possible use of the qualities of jazz to really build the nation. When he said there is no nation as of now, that means this is a better ground for jazz music. And the qualities of jazz, as he highlighted, the dialogue, the dialogical nature that is calling and responding, is what building a nation needs, calling and responding. That dialogue, and Nigeria has not had it. And the openness of improvisation, whereby diverse instruments can come into jazz to keep enriching it. There is no end to the possibility of adding another instrument to jazz. That means even when we have tried to stereotype Nigeria, it is possible also to bring all other components of Nigeria that is neglected into an ensemble that is called Nigeria. And this power of expression, like Dick Ellington said, in jazz is anything. It is the freedom of expression, where everyone is has a right to say the one he or she feels to build this nation. I'm thinking that jazz is exactly the paradigm we want to use that for. We need to build a Nigerian nation.
Thank you very much. Please, let's appreciate them. Okay, we'll move over to, we have the question from Dominican America, and it says, what is the difference between a jazz music and an Afrobeat? Please, what is the significance of jazz music in Africa?
Thank you, Dr. Mata. I'll direct this question to Dr. Gillian Graves. Dr. Gillian Richard Graves gave us very deep analysis, very energized analysis of structures of jazz music and how it evolved. Afrobeats, jazz, what is the difference? Dr. Richard Bush.
I would say it's largely time and labels. So jazz music, first of all, was shaped, impacted, influenced by African musical sensibilities, plural. And so what we are seeing at all times is the flow of music back and forth. The people of African descent, African Americans, they came to this part of the world from different cultures with different musical sensibilities, diverse, yet some commonalities in that. And what we're seeing now is sort of a re-influencing, right? So when I listen to Afrobeat, I hear jazz. When I listen to jazz, I hear Afrobeat, meaning that, someone had even asked, is Fela a jazz musician? Would you consider Fela a jazz musician, which ties into this because he's considered also the father of Afrobeats? And the answer is yes, because when you listen to Fela's music, the influences were jazz, were rock and roll, were all of those different styles, including the foundation of his Yoruba tradition and all of the other African traditions on which he was drawing. So when you listen to Afrobeat, you can hear some of the structures of jazz music within it, depending on who is singing and what they're singing, right? So Afrobeat is sort of a, how do we say, a combination, a compilation, a realization, an interpretation of jazz and other genres.
All right, thank you,
So,
Dr. Vivian. Can you quickly also add this? Somebody from Benin City is asking, is jazz close to country music?
no, not necessarily. It's not. There are different styles of music and quite different. And why I said not necessarily is because today you have some Black musicians that are doing country music. And so country music basically emerged among white Americans, and the style is different, the focus is different, the structure of the music is different. But why I said not really and just not simply no is because music is like water. Someone used that same reference earlier too. It's constantly changing, it's constantly shaping. So what happens when someone like Beyonce sings country music? What happens when a Black music, they bring certain elements, certain gospel elements, certain jazz elements, but they're inherently different because they came out of different well springs, different places. They had different functions in society. But you can always, you always see that sort of fusion and that sort of interchange.
Thank you very much for that wonderful explanation. Let's take the last one from Oshobo and then we'll come to contact. Oshobo in America, can you please unmute and ask your question? Please unmute, you can't hear you. You're muted.
My name is Olalere Fabola. When I look at jazz, I want to hazard its definition. When I look at jazz from the comparative philological expositions, I see that it shares same cognate family with joy. Jove, the Latin word for love. Jungle, being an African music, and enjoy. Now, if you look at the consonantal principles of this comparative philology, you discover that jazz has two consonants, that is a J and Z. In Latin, it's JV, which means Jove. In English, it's JY, which means joy. In African, you see jungle, JG. And then when you look at the Latin word flute, is fructose, meaning enjoy. No wonder why people enjoy jazz. It's a universal language. And again, I look at jazz as poetry. It's more of connotations than denotations, and which is why it is the idealization of the reality and realization of the ideal. So jazz is a pure African music. And again, lastly, J.D.Y. Peel of Oriental School, London, says that in his 40 years plus years of experience as a scholar, the idea that Yorubas have this creative energy to export religion, including music. This is why I'm not surprised that Fela Anikulapo Kuti initiated the marriage between Afro and jazz. I have also tried that in one of my albums, experimental album, which I intend to intensify very soon. When I translated the great Beatles of England, I translated some of their hit songs. And one of the darling tracks is Gangan. Gangan. Thank you for jazz.
Thank you very much. No, I think it's one of your comments. So let's take the last one. Maiduguri, and then we come back to Okawigoni. In view of your explanation, do we conclude that Anikulapo Kuti was a jazz musician?
I'll direct this question to Professor Amazing Words. I understand when someone is confused about jazz and country music, because as much as jazz was discriminated against when it started, at this point, it is accepted as serious music. So once Nigerians hear good music, that's especially something that sounds foreign, too good and foreign, because we have good indigenous music. A lot of times we call them jazz. In fact, I've heard people call what Celine Dion does jazz. I've heard people describe Rhino's music as jazz. As far as it sounds foreign, it is jazz. But we really need to get to the roots of the matter. It's amazing where it's Afrobeats, it's Fela's music, jazz. How? I think that's why that's what this person wants to understand. How? How is it jazz if it is jazz?
In as much as there are vocalized jazz genre. You see, there's a stream here in a number of states that runs all the way from Umunzu to Mamba. At Omo, it is called Oma. At Damasi, the same stream is the same stream. It's called different names by different communities. So, and when I was making my presentation, I remember saying that jazz is fluid and it takes the shape of the content. We cannot deprive the original creative ingenuity of the land, which is Afrobeat. We cannot replace it because of this event. And we are willing to try that, we will not succeed. So, but do we have these components and the common denominators that you look for in jazz? If the last one, yes, there's so many of them there. And because of the power of improvisation, was built on sounds. Because of improvisation, because of syncopation, that's accenting weak beats, because of the swing in the sword. So you would say that it was a melange of so many components that you find in the last one, but we have it has been categorized as Afrobeats. Many musicians try their hands on different genres, from blues to country to so, and sometimes in the muse that sees it for a composer or for a musician, it says something. Because sometimes understand that some of these things we call inspiration are given from outside the surrounding. So these people post, whoever they are, the music, they post this inspiration
down here on earth, waiting for someone who is disposed, recollected, for all this to accept the message. And I believe that once you accept that message, they are very happy over there that someone has got the message. And that's for you here and compose music. No, it was given to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Van, I think you take.
So we'll take the last questions from Oka Window and American.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Okay, I want to first thank the panelists and everyone that has contributed to the chat. So I want to talk about ask questions. Once you listen to level spiritual music and you listen to the canon spiritual music, you can see an undertone of jazz in it. This is where the early spiritual music has remained. So I want to ask why, when you listen to the present day gospel music, especially here in Nigeria, what have that flair of jazz music, the improvisation, the fluidity, why is it missing, and how what can be done to bring in this things back to African gospel music?
This question is for Chiba. You talked about theory, and now in Nigeria we have theory, and we have to teaching jazz, teaching people how to do that. I'm going to come from the point of I can understand how limited theory is because now, like as an Igbo child who was I was growing up speaking English and I was already getting speaking Igbo on Wednesdays and so. And now I've learned music theory as a musician, and now to find that freedom of expression about improvisation is it's hard to reconnect back to that African nature of the we talk about. So is there like a genuine solution? So
my question is for Dr. Richard Reeves. A few years back, I was having a discussion with my uncle, and when he defined jazz, he said that it was when the slaves, right, when slaves were taken from Africa to the United States, and they didn't have access to their, what do you call it, their instruments now, like theology, for example, and they carried the saxophone and played the saxophone the way he would play the approach, right? So I just want to know, is it safe to say that some of the melodies, the riffs that using jazz music, is it safe to say that these were originated from in East Africa? Because everything has been centered on the rhythm, so the influence of religious African music of jazz and sometimes of music. So it is safe to say the melody too can be categorized as being influenced from indigenous African music. That's my question.
All right, the last question and we'll close.
Okay. Is it proper to say jazz is owned by two distant peoples, like saying American African or African American? The reason is jazz as a word isn't have its roots in the Western world because of colonialism. I feel jazz is strictly music of rhythmic expressions, and the whites who may claim ownership of tonal music, melody, harmony might use that as a point to own jazz. So is it right to say jazz is owned by two far distant continents?
Okay, thank you very much. Please, just a minute.
Okay, this is really going to be the final words from the panelists. As you respond to these questions, respond to it as your final words, and of course, to make us go home with something, it just has to be a minute. We'll start with the question that was clearly directed to Dr. Opalike. In 1 minute.
I would urge us to go back and seek the roots of jazz. That is the concept. It's a street word. A street word that began to be spelled as JASS. It is some kind of a dirty slang. And that is why jazz was being brought in the first place. If you understand the roots of what jazz is, then you can connect to how we use it today. Jazz is magic. It was magic and is still magic. And it's still correct when we say it's magic. And as we use it today, it's still correct. My answer to your question will be attitude. Open yourself to your environment and to yourself, and in each of your being, express yourself exactly as you are. Don't allow yourself to be constricted. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Richard. You can quickly respond to the other question that was directed to you by Soto Paul
Yes.
on the African traditions in jazz.
Yes. So to answer your question simply, yes. Make sure I'm not muted. Yes. So it's not just jazz, but just if you look at the average American music, whether it's ragtime, blues, gospel, all of these genres, yes, West African musical traditions, West African cultural values, they informed how that music was played. So keep in mind that even though enslaved Africans did not bring their instruments with them, their traditional instruments, what they brought was the ability to create those instruments, the ability to reproduce those sounds. And with jazz specifically, it is a boundary pushing genre of music, right? It is not confined. And so, yes, influenced by West African traditions.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Richard Bruce, and take that as your final word, and we invite Mr. Oza to respond to Makanda Uzatu, who raised some serious questions.
Whether jazz Africa or whether the Western, this claims ownership. We know this thing about winners' right history. And clearly the Africans lost from the beginning because of this oral and scribal dichotomy. Somebody can come today and write that he discovered the river Niger, and everyone will be planning it all over the place. That's the thing being taught in schools. So anybody who writes that jazz or whatever is from America is saying the whatever is supposed to be the official cues. But you know history that somebody traveled from here to across the ocean and went to America. And the person carried his own culture with him. When they say like the empire rights back. And people will express themselves. And this expression that is continuing forever and ever. Of course, they have their president, African American. So it's not like they are discountenancing the African heritage. It's already taken that there's an African input to the music we're talking about. So in essence, the African Americanism is allowed. We take it like that. But for me, the original inspiration is African. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We'll take the final words from Professor Mezima, responding to the question, which is he seems to be seeking understanding on the direction that the gospel music in Africa or in Nigeria should go. And I understand that Professor Mezima has good experience across various genres.
Okay, I want to start with this statement. Most of the things we are meant to perceive as reality are false. I want you to know this. Writers of history, mainstream broadcast stations, most of the things they present to us are meant to keep us in a certain way. And you must rise above this if you want to make a sense of your life. The way jazz survived all the attacks and is celebrated today is what each and every one of us should aim. And the reason for survival, or the reason
that will aid the success is authenticity. Most of the things that we teach, we are lecturers, but most of the things we teach, some of the courses we teach, some of the things that students learn in this environment, I'm not speaking of Nigeria, not a skill particular, in Africa, are things that are useless to the students, things that even expire before they graduate. So what I'm saying is, until Africans decide to own themselves, own their culture, own their music, own their religion, own their health, own their food, own their medicines, the drugs they take, until we own these things, we will be shooting breeze, we will be making noise that we are required to make as part of those who are living, but we are not really living. So what I'm saying is, jazz survived because as a natural phenomenon that it has proved to be, its resilience is attached to it. Nothing artificial will survive us that. And most of the things we do in studies, in education, these are very artificial, not coming from us. So to bring back that spirit, for instance, in the question of the gospel music, the gospel itself has changed in Africa. I am sure most African gospel preachers are not preaching what Jesus preached. So the gospel itself has changed. That means the music must change. And music is the queen of the arts, and it has to do with the spirit. This is the only access man has towards God, the spirit, not the soul, not the body. So if you are doing a spiritual thing, you must get into the spirit. If you don't, if you go into music because you want money or fame, well, you won't last long, you know that. You won't survive the trials from marketers and producers. You will not survive. But if you are authentically called to produce music, if you are giving music and you have received that music, no force, no power on earth will ever stop you. So what I'm saying is we need to really understand what jazz is and admire the qualities that it has. These are the qualities that will defend us. These are the qualities, even when we speak of diversity, when we speak of diversity, I say to the fundamental features, diversity is artificial. You know what it means? Welcome to circus, goats and monkeys, as Shakespeare would say. Diversity is a natural thing. Music is natural because sound is in nature. Music is natural. Language is psychological. So music is deeper than language. That means you can enjoy sound without words. And that's what that is. You can enjoy sound because sound is in nature. But language is not in nature. Language is a psychology. So it is for us to understand that the event of today is calling up for all of us deeper realities that we need to fix, deeper essences that we need to understand. If you have 10 doctors to operate on you, and all of them are black people, and they are the experts for your ailments, would you, for the sake of diversity, say, no, can't bring some white doctors? You will not do that because your life is at stake. So when we speak of diversity, because we want to be politically correct, because if you have a company and 10 black people are making the best of the company, you can do for white people. You will not. So when we speak of diversity in some ways, we are trying to be politically correct. But diversity, just like music, is a natural thing. Music is a natural phenomenon, but it's not a universal language, like everybody keeps saying. It's not a universal language because everyone does not understand it. But this is a natural phenomenon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And on this note, I sign out. I am Gerald Eze, and I've enjoyed this session. I'll only add that you listen to all these conversations, you know the jazz musicians that were mentioned, Louis Armstrong, you understand the origins from New Orleans, so explore more about New Orleans, which is a beautiful place, and keep listening to the music. And like Professor Mason was saying when I was a student, let the music wash over you. Thank you.
We appreciate you greatly. And now I'll hand over the mic to Josephine for the announcement and closing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martha. As we draw the curtains on the remarkable Jazz Appreciation Day, let us reflect on the mesmerizing melodies, soulful rhythms, and captivating improvisation that have filled the air. Today, we pay tribute to the rich heritage of jazz, honoring the legends who paved the way for this extraordinary genre. The vibrant energy and infectious enthusiasm exhibited by everyone here truly embody the spirit of jazz. Let this celebration serve as a reminder of the transformative power of music and the timeless allure of jazz. We would like to appreciate our panelists, Mr. Uzo Mazim Uzoatu, Dr. Chika Okpalike, Dr. Gillian Richards Griffiths, Professor Chukwu Umezinwa, and to our wonderful co-host, Mr. Gerard Eze. Thank you so much for coming on the program. And we also want to thank Window on America, OCA, for taking the lead in this year's International Jazz Day. We would also like to remind us that on May 3rd is our World Press Freedom Day. This year we have an interesting topic that we are looking at. We would like you to join us on May 3rd in all our American spaces for this program. Thank you so much. So we'd like to take an interlude as we round off today. DJ, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, the shark has curly teeth, dear, and he shows them pearly white. Just a jackknife has Mackie, dear, and he keeps it out of sight. When the shark bites with his teeth, dear, scarlet billows start to spread. Fancy gloves, though, where's Mackie, dear? So there's not a trace of red on a sidewalk on a Sunday morning. God's body, ooh,
And he spread this message all across the land.
Oh, sorry, I was eating. Okay, I want to appreciate everyone, especially all our directors and the participants from all the American spaces in Nigeria. We appreciate you all for joining this call. We hope you enjoyed this program. We also, in a special way, want to appreciate Professor Samuel Itayo, the American Spaces consultant, for giving us this opportunity to host this event. Thank you, and we hope you enjoy this program. Thank you, Josephine, for your support throughout the program. Thank you, Gideon. Thank you for joining this call. We appreciate you. Thank you very much. See you next time in our program. Bye for now.
Thank you, Mata. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
So,